Why have the church's enemies been so successful in the last 50 or so years, and how are we ever going to turn things around? Are you at all concerned with what the confusion in this world today is doing to the church of tomorrow? Utopianism, secularism, hedonism. Why have the enemies of the church been so successful in the last 50 or so years? Be sure to share your thoughts below. I read each and every comment. Welcome, I'm Brad Schepisi. In last week's video, I mentioned that in order to be successful on a mission or against an enemy, you need to first identify that mission or that enemy. So before we can answer that first question, I think we should identify our mission or identify that enemy. And then next week, in next week's video, we'll begin to develop a strategy to defeat that enemy. Quick review. Throughout the Old Testament, we see the people of God, the Israelites, who are the precursors of the church, we see them having a lot of struggles with their enemies, Egypt, Babylon, Syria, Greece, and Rome. And throughout all of these struggles, God commands them, with a few exceptions, to stay in Israel and to not intermingle, not to intermarry. He's trying to set them apart and to teach them holiness, to not engage in the pagan activities of all of these nations. But starting at Pentecost, we see a dramatic change. When all of the apostles are gathered in the upper room, it becomes kind of a microcosm of the Old Testament Israelites. They're hiding in the upper room for fear of their lives, and all of the nations are gathered outside their door. Some of them presumably are looking for them to kill them, and they're hiding in fear. But when the Holy Spirit falls upon them, suddenly they're now filled with the grace to engage the violent, dangerous world that they never had before. So they burst open the doors and they preach the gospel. And that day, 3,000 people were baptized. And at this moment, we now see a change in the focus of the people of God. They're no longer in hiding in the Holy Land. They're now spreading out. Peter goes to Rome. St. Paul set sail across the world. So that, 500 years later, 400 years later, all of those nations, Egypt, Babylon, Syria, Greece, and Rome, all are converted, and each of them becomes a center of Christianity in the ancient world. But the enemies of God do not give up. In the next stage, we see the rise of ideologies that are designed to tear down the church, heresies. But again, we see God raise up holy saints who go out on mission to preach against these heresies. For example, St. Dominic went into southern France to preach against the Albigensian heresy. Now, in our day, we see these same ideologies, and the ideologies from the Enlightenment and from the Reformation kind of morphing into something new, something Pope St. Pius X called the synthesis of all heresies. And it's been so destructive such that today we've seen the virtual collapse of Catholic culture virtually around the entire world, all from 4 or 5 ideologies. Now, these 4 or 5 ideologies are secularism and all of her children, materialism, scientism, reductionism, consumerism. All of these conspire to rob us of our faith. Then number 2 is going to be fundamentalism. Fundamentalism, through some quasi-superstition, seeks to rob us of our reason. Number 3 is hedonism and all of her children, divorce, pornography, abortion, and all of these conspire to rob us of our vocation in the family, our vocation to be fruitful and to multiply. And number 4 is Utopianism, which seeks to supplant God in his role in creation as the provider for all of creation. So all of her children are socialism, communism, totalitarianism, all of that whole family that seek to take away our relationship to God. If he will not give us the fruit, then we'll take it. It's like a modern day Tower of Babel. These 4, and there's a 5th, and we'll speak about that one in another video on another day, but they've conspired to completely tear down, to unravel the Catholic culture that the saints who went before us gave their lives building, so that today all of those pagan cultures that I spoke about at the beginning of this video, they've all reestablished themselves in the world today. But strangely enough, at the exact same time that these 4 or 5 ideologies are getting their foothold, we see a shift away from missionary activity and a primary focus on social programs. So my question for you is, who is spreading the gospel today? Who is defending the church from her enemies? Who are the Peter and the Paul, the Francis and the Dominic of today? Are there Catholics in the world today that are actually engaged in missionary work? Am I just too cynical to believe that the vast majority of Catholics today have adopted the lifestyle of this culture, that we are essentially Catholic in name only? Is there anything about our daily lives that previous generations of missionary Catholics would recognize as being Catholic in the manner in which they lived it? I mean, what I see most of us engaged in is the whole political song and dance, the Republican versus Democrat thing. And the most we can ever hope to get from politics is a society or a culture that encourages virtue. And I'm all for that. I'm completely on board with that. But virtue's not going to save anyone. So maybe the amount of time that we're spending in that sphere, in that realm, isn't justified. Now, I know we're all praying and we're all working to overturn Roe versus Wade, and hopefully that's just around the corner. But in the 46 years that it's taken for this to happen, we have a society that has become so vicious and so violent towards life, maybe that over that period of time we didn't need as many talking heads arguing on CNN, and maybe we needed more saints like Saint Dominic evangelizing the culture, changing hearts, so that on the day that this happens, the society is ready for it and the society is welcoming to it. And what about the Mancave thing? It's been a while since I've harped on that. Some of you longtime subscribers are probably rolling your eyes now. Yes, the Mancave thing. How many guys are locked in their man cave watching sports or playing video games all day? I mean, we all have hobbies. Hobbies are important, but we really need to kind of define what a hobby is. If you spend 6 hours a day playing video games, that's not a hobby. That's called an obsession. That's 36 hours a week. God did not give you 36 hours a week so that you can play video games. He gave you that time to serve others, whether that's your immediate family or in evangelization in some form. But that time is not your time. That time God gave you so that you can pour out yourself in service to others. I know I'm getting off topic here, and I think we can all insert our own thing, pornography, materialism, consumerism, whatever it is. We all have these things, but the point is that in conjunction, all of these things work together to keep Catholics from evangelizing the culture. The reason why the enemy has advanced so far is not just because of well-coordinated attacks. It's also because he faced little to no opposition. It's time that Catholics begin missionary evangelization again, whether that's in your community or in extreme cases like St. Paul, to actually get on a ship and sail across the world. In the next video, I'm going to break down Catholic missionary evangelization. Subscribe so you do not miss that video. Help me to get this message out. Please pray for me. Share this video, especially with guys who play video games for 6 hours every day. Consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is in the description. I look them in the eye and I say, I'm Catholic. Oh, how about that? We were Catholic too. Wait, what?